I'm just going to take a moment to read a story. It's a really beautiful story by Max Lucado, great one for Father's Day, and it's called Because I Love You. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you again, in case you didn't hear me, to Ebenezer and Millie's children for leading us so beautifully just then in prayer. Thank you, guys. Because I love you. So long ago, in a land unlike any you've ever seen before, lived a wise man called Shaddai. Now, Shaddai was a large man with a tender heart. He had bright blue eyes and a long, thick beard. When he laughed, his cheeks would lift until his eyes became like half moons of joy. When he sang, everyone stopped to listen. Tall trees would bend. Squirrels, butterflies, and birds would pause. Even the children would turn away and listen when they heard his voice. And well, they should, because it was for them that he sang. And for the children, Shaddai had built a wonderful village. It was more than any child could dream of. The children plunged into the sky blue pond. They squealed as they soared high on the swings hung from the apple tree branches. And they scampered through the meadows and giggled in the orchards. When Shaddai wasn't in the meadow with the children, or in the orchards with the children, he would always be in his workshop with the children. They loved to be with him while he worked. They loved the smell of the sawdust. They loved to hear him sing and to watch him carve a chair out of a log or make a table out of a tree. Every night he would gather them on the grassy meadow and tell the children stories. Fascinated, they would listen to him as long as their weary eyes would allow them to stay awake. The children loved Shaddai, and Shaddai loved the children. He knew each one by name, and he knew everything about them. He knew Lucy's love of birds, and he knew Roland's fear of the dark. He knew young Paladin was curious. When one of them called his name, he dropped whatever he was doing, and he turned towards them. His heart had 100 strings, each one held by a different child, and Shaddai loved each one the same. That's why he built the wall. Shaddai had built a high stone fence around the village. The wall was so high that it stood right high above him. He spent days building it, and as he built, he didn't sing. A deadly forest stood outside the village. As Shaddai built the fence, he would often pause and look into the shadows beyond. Cruel thorns and wild beasts and hidden pits filled that forest. It was no place for the children that he loved. Beyond that wall is danger, he would tell the children. You were made for my village, not for that terrible land beyond. Stay here, it's safe here. But in his heart, he knew it was only a matter of time. The day he placed the last stone on the wall, he returned to his shop, took a long tree branch, sat down at his bench and carved a staff. I'll be ready, he told himself. Sometime later, a little boy ran into Shaddai's workshop. The sandy-haired child brought the maker both joy and worry. Shaddai! The maker dropped his hammer and turned. Paladin, what is it? The boy spoke in spurts as he gasped for air. The wall! I found a hole! The boy's hand stretched to show the size. Someone could crawl through it. Shaddai sat down. I knew it would be you, Paladin. Now tell me, how did you find it? Well, I was walking along the wall searching for holes. Well, yes, I was looking for holes. So you could see out into the forest? Well, I was curious, Shaddai. Why is that so bad? The maker cupped the small face in his hands and lifted it so the boy could look right into his eyes. Paladin's little tummy felt uneasy. Now, Paladin, listen to me. A journey into the forest will hurt you. You weren't made for those lands. If you leave here, you won't be able to find your way back. Will you all fix the hole then, will you? No, Paladin. I created the hole because I love you so much. But if you don't fix it, the children might leave. Well, I know that, Paladin. But I want the children to stay because they want to, not because they have to. Young Paladin just didn't understand. Uncomfortable, he turned to leave. He needed to think about what Shaddai had said. Part of him wanted the safety of Shaddai's shop, but the other part of him drew towards that fence. He looked back into the workshop. There sat Shaddai, still watching him. Paladin turned and walked away as fast as he could, and before he knew it, he was going towards the fence. I won't get too near, he said to himself. I'll just peek out. But questions came as quickly as his steps did. Well, why am I so curious? Is it wrong to want to see what's beyond that fence? And by now, Paladin was at the hole. Without stopping to think, he lay on his stomach and wiggled through just as far as he could to stick his head out on the other side. I'm just going to take a quick look, he told himself. What could be wrong with that? Soon he was through the hole and on the other side of the wall. He rose to his feet slowly. Well, it's not so bad, he said aloud. I think it's quite nice out here. What was Shaddai worried about? Paladin began walking into the forest. Twigs snapped under his bare feet. Sweet scented flowers filled the air. Well, I don't see any scary creatures, he thought. The trees were so thick that he could barely see the sky. Just a few steps into the forest, he said aloud, just to see what it's like. After a dozen more steps, he stopped. He quite liked the wilderness. Nothing to fear here, he said. And for the first time in his young life, he believed that Shaddai was wrong. Just wait until I tell the other children. And then he turned to go back through the hole. But the hole was gone. He stopped and stared. All he could see was a solid wall. Paladin ran to the wall. Was this the spot where he crawled through? Well, he couldn't remember. He ran a dozen steps one way and then ran back another dozen the other way. But there was nothing. Suddenly, he heard a really strange sound in the woods behind him. He turned around, but he saw nothing. And then he looked into the forest. It didn't seem very friendly anymore. It was dark, it was scary. He felt like it was going to destroy him. Desperately, he searched the wall. He couldn't climb over it. He couldn't break through it. There was no way home. If you leave here, you won't find your way home. Shaddai's words rang in his mind. Paladin's eyes were wide with fear. He sat on the ground and he hugged his knees to his chest and he began to cry. Huddled there, lonely and afraid, he remembered something else that Shaddai had often said to him. I love you so much, Paladin. Does he love me enough to come and find me? I wonder if he'll hear me if I call to him. Shaddai! Shaddai! I'm really sorry I didn't listen to you. Please come and help me. Paladin's cry had been heard by the one who loved him, even before he spoke. For as the boy left Shaddai's workshop, the Maker had watched him as long as he could. When Paladin was out of sight, Shaddai turned, not to take up his work, but to take off his apron. He hung his tools on the wall. Then he reached into the corner and took the staff, the one he'd carved after he finished the wall. Even before Paladin had reached the wall, Shaddai had left the shop. Even before Paladin had asked for help, Shaddai was on the way to give it. Even before the hole in the wall had closed, Shaddai had opened another. His strong hands pulled away the rocks until he could see into the forest. With his staff at his side, Shaddai crawled through the hole. He left the village he'd made, and he set out in search for his child.